Hello and welcome to Edge of Emotion. Maria and Enrique met back in school. They had been in the same class since they were 8 years old, and Enrique immediately liked Maria, a calm girl with a long, thick braid who had moved from another town. For a long time, the boy observed her from a distance, not daring to approach, but one day he mustered up the courage and offered to walk Maria home after school. The girl shyly agreed. It turned out she lived quite far from the school. They had to take a bus, and Enrique paid for both of them, spending all the coins he had with him. "Why doesn't your mom pick you up from school? It's dangerous to travel so far alone," the boy wondered. He himself lived just a 3-minute leisurely walk from the school. "Mom works a lot," Maria shrugged. "We don't have a dad, so she has to earn money by herself. I also have 2 younger sisters. They go to kindergarten, and in the evenings, I pick them up and take them home." Enrique was surprised again. He was an only child, and all his parents' love was focused on him. "Do you want me to walk you home every day?" he asked. Maria shyly nodded. "I would really appreciate it," she admitted quietly. From then on, they became best friends. The girl and the boy supported each other in all situations, and when they grew up, they started dating. They entered the same university, but in different departments. Maria decided she wanted to study foreign languages, while Enrique chose chemistry. After receiving their diplomas, they decided to get married. Maria's mother, Elena, was very fond of her future son-in-law. She thanked heaven every day that God had sent her daughter such a beloved. "I won't be afraid to die when I know you're in safe hands," Elena often told her daughter. Maria would wave her off in response, though her heart tightened with an unclear premonition every time. "Mom, what are you talking about? It's too early for you to die." And Maria would tenderly hug her elderly mother. The woman had gone gray early and looked older than her years because she had to work so hard all her life. Now that her daughters were grown, it became a bit easier for her, but she still didn't know how to take time for herself. Of course, Elena worked less, but she never went anywhere, although she had been offered vacations many times. Maria even wanted to buy her a trip, but Elena refused. "I can't sit idle," she said. "By the sea, you won't have to sit," Enrique joked. "You need to lie on the sand and enjoy the sun." "I can't do that." Elena laughed, shaking her head. In the end, Maria and Enrique left the woman alone. But they shouldn't have. If Maria had known what would happen, she would have been more persistent. After the graduation party at the university, the young couple began preparing for their wedding. Maria was shopping for a wedding dress, shoes, and other accessories. Enrique was looking for a restaurant where they could celebrate the wedding with family and friends. Everything seemed magical, and Maria enjoyed every moment of the preparations. One day, while signing invitations with her mother, the woman suddenly turned very pale. "Mom, what's wrong?" Maria asked, alarmed. "I feel dizzy," her mother admitted. "I've been feeling unwell all day." "Why didn't you say anything?" "You should have called the doctor," Maria said reproachfully. "Mom, you don't take care of yourself at all." "But I had to help you choose the wedding cake," Elena replied plaintively. Her voice was very weak, and she indeed looked unwell. Her eyes were watering, and her face was even paler than usual. "I could have managed on my own," Maria responded, touching Elena's forehead, and exclaimed in fear, "Mom, you're so hot. You have a fever." Elena only nodded in response. She tried to get up from the table but had no strength. Noticing this, Maria became very worried. "Mom, you look terrible. I'll call an ambulance right now." The girl quickly ran for the phone and called the doctors. Then she called Enrique and asked him to come over. He said he would be free in an hour. Maria helped Elena up and led her to the bedroom. As soon as the woman touched the pillow, her eyes closed, and she fell into a deep sleep. Poor Mom, thought Maria. Finally, the ambulance arrived. The doctors went into Maria's mother's room and stayed there for about 15 minutes. Then an elderly doctor came out to Maria and said, "Your mother needs to be hospitalized urgently." She needs a thorough examination. According to her, she hasn't seen a doctor in a very long time. We suspect it's not just a simple cold. Maria fearfully covered her mouth with her hand. Poor Mom, she repeated aloud. You should have monitored her health more closely, the doctor said reproachfully. I'm afraid she has serious health problems. Hearing this, Maria began to cry. She gathered the necessary things and called Enrique again. They're taking Mom to the hospital, and I'm going with her, she said hurriedly into the phone. What happened? Enrique asked, worried. We don't know for sure yet, but it seems Mom is seriously ill, Maria replied plaintively and couldn't hold back her sobs. Maria, are you crying? When are you leaving? I'll be there in 20 minutes. We're leaving right now, Enrique. Then I'll go straight to the hospital. The young man decided. No, it's not necessary, I can handle it, Maria replied softly. No, I don't want to leave you alone at a time like this, Enrique answered. Which hospital are you going to? Maria got the address from the doctor. I'll be there in 15 minutes, Enrique said and hung up. Maria mentally thanked him for his care. Seeing her beloved in the hospital lobby, she threw her arms around Enrique's neck. Thank you for coming, Maria whispered. Everything will be okay, Enrique replied. Elena was thoroughly examined, and the results were disappointing. She was diagnosed with a serious illness in a very advanced stage. To Maria's and Enrique's questions about the possibility of curing the illness, the doctors only shook their heads negatively. Unfortunately, you sought help too late, said Elena's attending physician. It is unlikely that medication and therapy can change anything. Only a miracle can help Elena now. Upon hearing the doctor's verdict, Maria wept bitterly, burying her face in Enrique's shoulder. He held her tightly and silently stroked her hair. Words could no longer help. All you can do is take care of your mother and give her all your love. She has no more than 2 or 3 years left to live. Maria cried even harder. She felt very sorry for her mother, who had dedicated her whole life to her children and now was doomed to die. A clear thought formed in Maria's mind. Now it was her turn to sacrifice something for her mother. When she told Enrique this, he only shook his head. Maria, it's not your fault. This was your mother's choice. You are not obliged to sacrifice anything, he said reasonably. But the girl did not agree with him. Mom did so much for us and our sisters, I cannot be ungrateful. I will do everything to make her last years as comfortable as possible. And your sisters? Should they also sacrifice their lives? Maria shook her head. No, the girls are getting their programming degrees abroad right now. Their lives are just beginning. They need to get an education. What about you? What about me? I was offered an assistant position at the university. I can work there part-time. The rest of the time I will be by my mother's bedside. Enrique swallowed the lump in his throat. And me? And our upcoming wedding? He asked quietly. Maria cried. We'll have to cancel it. Right now I can't devote time to my own family. Enrique couldn't believe what he heard. You want to break up with me, Maria? He asked, stunned. Maria looked at him sadly. No, I don't want to. You are the best thing in my life. But I can't do otherwise. My mother is very important to me. And you? You won't wait for me for 3 years, will you? Enrique gazed intently into Maria's eyes. I love you very much, Maria. I have loved you all my life. But now you have decided to sacrifice everything and push me away. I don't know what to say. With these words, Enrique stood up and, slightly staggering, walked down the hospital corridor toward the exit. Maria watched him go for a long time. She was sure she would never see him again. 3 months passed. Enrique neither called nor wrote to Maria, and the girl had long lost hope of ever seeing him again. She diligently took care of her mother and spent all her free time from work at the university by her bedside. The woman was slowly fading away. She was tormented by headaches and insomnia, and when she managed to sleep, her sleep was fitful. Elena had turned completely gray, becoming an old woman. Only her daughter could cheer her up, and Elena thanked God every night for giving her such a child. Maria's sisters also called almost every day, but they couldn't come. Their scholarships were barely enough for themselves. They were very worried about their mother and upset that they couldn't be there, but Maria reassured them, saying she was managing just fine. "But sometimes you must want to take a break and go somewhere," they said. "I'm fine with everything," Maria replied, though deep down she missed Enrique very much. Where is he now? What is he doing? Does he still think about her, or has he erased Maria from his mind forever, closing his heart to her? Maria didn't know the answers to these questions. She lived in the present, not looking back or peering into the future. The girl tried not to remember the happy moments she shared with Enrique, but he often appeared in her dreams at night. Maria woke up with tears in her eyes and couldn't forget the feeling of the familiar warmth of her beloved for a long time. And then, 3 months after he left, she found an email from Enrique in her inbox. At first, Maria couldn't believe her eyes. He hadn't been in touch for 3 months. Deep down, the girl thought he had decided to break up with her forever. And now this letter. With trembling hands, Maria clicked on it and began to read. "Darling, how are you? I hope you're doing well. How is Senora Elena? I would be very happy to hear that she is better. I'm sorry I disappeared for 3 long months. It was very difficult for me to understand and accept your decision to sacrifice our relationship. I always thought that loved ones should be together during the hardest times. I believed that it was easier to get through sad and difficult moments, which life, unfortunately, often throws at us. But you decided otherwise, and I respect your opinion. I couldn't stay in our town, everything reminded me of our love and you. I couldn't walk down the street without remembering how we strolled along it together. Even at home, everything spoke to me about you, your gifts, our photos together. So I made a decision. I took only what was necessary, bought a bus ticket, withdrew all my savings, and went to the first city I knew nothing about. After spending a few days there, I moved on. In each city, I wandered the streets alone, went into cafes, and watched people. It was very painful for me to see young couples, similar to us, who were together. They held hands, talked, and I imagined you. What if we had gone on this journey together? But that was impossible, and I understood perfectly that you couldn't leave your mom. So I tried not to look at happy lovers and focused on my thoughts. I thought about how all my previous life plans were destroyed in an instant. Now I had nothing left. And I had to come up with something, gather the pieces together, and create a new picture to somehow continue the path. Of course, now I had neither landmarks nor a map, but that gave me an advantage. I could start over as I wanted. However, for a long time, I couldn't understand who I was. The wound inside me was too deep for me to breathe freely and dream about anything. Sometimes it seemed to me that I would never find peace and would wander the world for the rest of my life. As soon as I arrived in the next city, I immediately wanted to leave. On the road, I felt a little better. I could just dissolve into the music playing in my headphones and not think about what ruins my life had turned into. But in one of the towns, I wanted to stay for a while. It impressed me with its quiet tranquility. The town was old, and I spent a long time wandering the cobblestone streets, strolling through shady alleys, or by a beautiful lake, inhaling the fragrance of flowers. One midday, I was sitting by the lake near a pier where a group of boys was playing. The day was hot, and I lazily considered taking a swim but was in no hurry to decide. The boys were diving into the lake headfirst and resurfacing with splashes. One of the younger boys stood aside. They called him to join the fun, but he just waved them off. "You know I can't swim. You'll learn." The older boys shouted at him with laughter, but the boy did not hurry to approach the edge of the pier. However, the others had no intention of leaving him alone. 2 boys ran up to him, laughing and shouting, and, grabbing him by the arms, dragged him toward the water. The boy resisted as best he could, but the boys were older, tall, and strong. Eventually, there was a splash as the boy was pushed into the water. Seeing this, I jumped up. I could now see that the child was desperately flailing in the water, trying to grab the pilings supporting the pier's boards. The other boys, thinking he was pretending, laughed at him. I suddenly realized that the boy was drowning and that there was very little time left. I ran along the pier and, without undressing, jumped into the water. After swimming a few meters, I reached the child and, grabbing him, headed to the surface. Once above water, I shouted to the boys to help pull the boy onto the pier. Several hands reached out for the limp body. Then the boys helped me as well. I rushed to the boy lying on the boards and performed artificial respiration. The boy started coughing and began to breathe. I stood up and gave the quiet boys a reproachful look. "Why did you do that? Didn't you hear what he said?" They guiltily lowered their eyes. "Does anyone know where this boy lives?" One of the boys raised his head and stepped forward. "He's my cousin. He and his grandfather came to visit us from the capital." I glared at the boy angrily. "And you let your friends treat him like that?" The boy blushed and didn't know what to say. "Do you live far?" I asked sternly. The boy waved his hand towards the nearest street. "Our house is about 10 minutes from here." I nodded. "Help me lift him. He can't walk home by himself right now." The boys obeyed and I picked up the child. He was very thin and frail, so carrying him was not difficult. The cousin led the way. We quickly reached their house, a pretty and fairly large mansion of a soft blue color. The boy opened the gate and let me through. Walking along a path covered with small pinkish pebbles, I approached the front door. The boy got ahead of me and rang the bell. A woman about 35 years old opened the door. Seeing us, she looked alarmed. "Juan, what happened to Ernesto?" she exclaimed, stepping back to let me in. "His friends pushed him off the pier. Fortunately, I was able to save him." I replied shortly, noticing the look the woman gave the boy. I headed to the living room and laid Ernesto on a white leather sofa. "Is that true?" I heard the woman ask. She was addressing the older boy, Juan, who appeared to be her son. Her voice was calm but tinged with anger. "Yes," the boy replied quietly. "Go to your room. You are grounded. I will tell your father to speak with you when he returns," I heard her say. A moment later, she appeared in the living room. "We are so grateful to you," she said to me. "This is my nephew Ernesto, my brother's son. They came to visit us with my father." I nodded. "Your son already told me. Please leave your phone number. I'm sure my father will want to thank you." I was about to shake my head and say I didn't need anything, but the woman looked at me with such gratitude that I couldn't refuse her. I gave her my number and quickly said goodbye. Later in the evening, as I sat on the veranda of a cozy coffee shop drinking coffee, I received a call. It was Grandpa Ernesto. "You have no idea how grateful I am that you saved my grandson. I don't understand what happened to the minds of Juan and his friends, but they behaved in the most inappropriate manner. I would like to thank you personally. Could we meet somewhere in the city this evening? If it's convenient for you, of course. I don't expect any reward from you, but if you insist, fine." We agreed to meet in the city's Central Park in an hour. I calmly finished my coffee and leisurely headed there. Near the clock tower, a tall, elderly man of about 60 in a dark suit was already waiting for me. I was surprised. It was a weekend, and meeting a passerby in a suit today was practically impossible. When I approached, the man shook my hand and introduced himself. "My name is Antonio Saldivar." I introduced myself. We walked along one of the park's alleys and started talking. It turned out that Antonio was a successful businessman living in the capital and often traveling around the country. "And you, Enrique, are a young specialist recently graduated from university?" he asked. "That's right," I was surprised by his knowledge. Senor Antonio smiled. "Over the years I've lived, I've learned a bit about understanding people." In response, I nodded with a smile too. It was incredibly easy to talk to this man. It felt like we had known each other for many years. He had a way of putting people at ease, speaking in a quiet and calm tone that conveyed deep respect. Then tell me, Enrique, what are you doing in a small town with no prospects? Visiting relatives, like me? I sighed again and shook my head. It seemed Antonio noticed the sadness that briefly flashed in my eyes. It's something else, I replied and told him our sad story. Señor Saldivar listened very attentively, then remained thoughtfully silent for a while. Not knowing why, I eagerly awaited his response. Finally, Señor Antonio said the following. First of all, I sympathize with you deeply. However, in my experience, there are no hopeless situations. His words made my heart leap with joy. It seems our meeting was not accidental. The thing is, a good friend of mine invests in various medical research. If you tell me a bit more about your beloved's mother's illness, I will check with him to see if he has any latest information on the matter. I nodded excitedly and told him everything I knew. Antonio made some notes in his phone and promised to find out everything the next day. We walked in the park for a while longer, then went to a coffee shop for a coffee and finally said goodbye. I had the most pleasant impressions from that evening and couldn't fall asleep for a long time reminiscing about our conversation. The next morning, I woke up very early and waited for Antonio's call. He called around noon and reported what he had found out. His friend is indeed investing quite a lot in the area we need. Can you imagine? Señor Antonio asked him to help us. Now I have the contacts of Señor Castro, Saldivar's friend. Maria, I am sure we cannot miss this opportunity. What if we really can help Señora Elena? Please reply to me as soon as possible and I will immediately contact Señor Castro. P.S. I miss you terribly. Love, your Enrique. After reading this letter, Maria couldn't hold back her tears. Enrique still loves and misses her. And he also found a way to help her mother. Maria couldn't comprehend all of this. After gathering her thoughts a bit, she pressed the reply button and wrote. Dear Enrique, you can't imagine how grateful I am to you. I will talk to Mom right now. Of course, even if she has doubts, I will persuade her to try. You are absolutely right. We cannot miss this opportunity. And I want you to know I love and miss you too. Yours, Maria. Having sent the letter, Maria hurried to her mother's room and told her everything. Elena couldn't believe what she heard. Mixed feelings arose in her soul, hope for recovery, and at the same time fear of the unknown. Mom, Maria said gently, taking her hand. I will be by your side no matter what. You have nothing to worry about. And Elena, trustingly looking at her daughter, agreed to try. Maria wrote to Enrique about this and immediately received a reply that he would do everything he could. An hour later, the phone rang. Enrique's name appeared on Maria's smartphone display. With a voice trembling with excitement, the girl answered. Yes? Maria, she heard the familiar voice. Enrique, I am so happy to hear you, the girl exclaimed into the phone. Me too, her beloved replied and quickly added, I found out everything. Señor Castro, Antonio's friend, is ready to meet and help us. You need to come to the capital. I will be there too. Oh, Enrique, I am so worried, but I am sure that my mother has a chance. I will book tickets for the next flight right away. Great. Let me know afterwards so I can meet you. Enrique. Thank you, Maria said softly. Not yet, the young man replied, but the girl understood that he was very pleased. Love you, she whispered. And I love you, Enrique replied. Maria disconnected the call and, heading to her room, began searching for tickets for the next flight. The flight would take about an hour and a half and the girl was worried about how Elena would handle it. Fortunately, everything went well. With Maria's help, the woman managed to board and she dozed quietly in her seat throughout the flight. At the airport, Enrique was already waiting for them. When Maria saw his familiar silhouette, her heart leapt with joy. Enrique rushed to them, hugged Maria and then Elena and took their luggage. I rented a car, he said. Let's go, It's in the parking lot. Maria took Elena by the arm and they headed for the exit. Enrique walked beside them, glancing at Maria every now and then. She also kept looking at him from time to time. Enrique helped the ladies into the back seat, then got in himself and started the car. I haven't met Señor Castro yet, but I think he is as pleasant as Antonio Saldivar, with whom we quickly became friends. The car drove through the streets of the capital and Maria eagerly looked at the city's buildings and skyscrapers. It seemed that life here flowed in a completely different dimension. Streams of people hurried about their business and there were bright signs of bakeries, boutiques, coffee shops and various companies everywhere. Elena dozed off again, the journey had exhausted her. Finally, Enrique parked near a tall office building. This is where Señor Castro's company is located. He expects us at 2 o'clock. Maria only nodded in response. She completely trusted Enrique and was now ready to blindly follow him wherever he led them. The young man helped Elena out of the car and they entered the building. A young, dark-skinned receptionist escorted them to the elevators, informing them that Señor Castro's office was on the 5th floor. He is already expecting you, the young man added, nodding at Enrique. Enrique thanked the receptionist and called the elevator. Señor Castro's office turned out to be very bright and spacious. Its owner was busy when they knocked and entered. He was sorting through papers and signing them. Seeing the visitors, he gave a brief nod and gestured to the chairs on the other side of his wide desk. Enrique helped Elena sit down, pulled out a chair for Maria and sat down himself. Señor Castro made a mixed impression on him. His stern appearance revealed a not very talkative person. He was very tall and thin, with a face covered in wrinkles and gray hair sticking out in all directions. Maria didn't like him at all, but she believed that this man could help her mother. The girl threw a quick glance at Enrique and understood that he had the same impression. He felt Maria looking at him and met her eyes. Everything will be all right, she read in them. She quietly exhaled and relaxed a little. Finally, Señor Castro looked up from his papers. I am ready to listen to you carefully, he said rather sternly, looking at Enrique. Enrique began to recount the details of Elena's illness. You can help us, right? Enrique asked at the end of his speech. Señor Castro remained silent for a long time. Actually, I never do anything just like that. What you are asking me to do costs an enormous amount of money. He cast a critical glance at Enrique, Maria, and Elena, then continued dryly. Judging by your appearance, you don't have that kind of money and probably never will. Maria was overwhelmed with a wave of anger, but she managed to restrain herself. However, since Antonio, my good friend who once helped me a lot, has vouched for you, I cannot refuse your request. Maria felt the anxiety that had come over her with the anger start to recede. Señor Castro shuffled some papers from one pile to another and played with his pen. However, I cannot do you this favor for free, he said, looking at Enrique. What do you want? Enrique asked, surprised. Antonio told me that you are a young, promising chemist. Is that correct? Señor Castro asked directly. Enrique nodded. I just need fresh blood. If you are willing to sign a contract with my company, I will do everything in my power to ensure that the esteemed lady sitting opposite me can recover. Enrique smiled. If that's all you want, then I will gladly join your company. Señor Castro looked rather grimly at the young man. But you don't know all the details, he said. Enrique hesitated for a moment. What else do I need to know? Just one small nuance, Señor Castro said with a strange chuckle. The position I intend to appoint you to requires that you spend 5 years conducting research in South Africa. What? Enrique turned pale. Do I have to move? Those are the terms of the deal I'm willing to make. You either accept them or you don't. The choice is yours. Enrique bit his lip. Maria clutched her wrist tightly. By the way, I want to remind you that I cannot guarantee that the lady will recover. Now that you have all the necessary information, you just have to make a decision. I won't rush you. Take a few minutes to think. With these words, Senor Castro returned to his papers. Maria felt tears welling up in her eyes. She caught Enrique's gaze and wanted to shake her head, but seeing the determination in his eyes, she froze in place. "I agree." The young man announced his decision. "When can I sign the contract?" Senor Castro looked up. "Today I will pass all the information to the lawyer, and he will draw up the contract. Tomorrow morning you can come here and sign it." Enrique nodded and said, "The only thing I dare to ask is, can I delay the departure for a month? I feel obliged to help Maria and Senora Elena settle in the capital initially." Senor Castro quickly glanced at Maria's pale face and nodded. "Fine," he said curtly. "I won't detain you any longer. You can get all the information about the research and treatment plan from the administrator who showed you in." Enrique nodded and stood up. Together with Maria, they helped Elena up and left Senor Castro's office. Enrique drove the ladies to the apartment he had rented for them. It was a cozy two-bedroom apartment not far from the center. Maria helped Elena get into bed, and the woman immediately fell asleep. The girl headed to the kitchen, where Enrique was waiting for her. She sat down next to him and burst into tears. The young man hugged her to comfort her and began whispering soft words of consolation. "You need to rest," he said. "Let me go to the supermarket and buy you some groceries, and you go to your room and get a good night's sleep." But Maria shook her head. "I missed you so much, my dear," she whispered in his ear. "I can't fall asleep if you're not beside me again." With these words, Maria kissed Enrique. His heart began to race from the long-forgotten sensation, the smell of her hair, and the warmth that had been the meaning of his existence for so long. And now he would have to let her go again for a long 5 years. Would she wait for him? Enrique did not believe it was possible. He inhaled the familiar scent of his beloved and couldn't get enough of it. Maria stood up and led Enrique to the bedroom. Neither of them wanted these moments to ever end. The next day, Enrique took Senora Elena and Maria to the treatment center, and afterward he went to the office to sign a contract. The lawyer was already waiting for him in his office, and it took Enrique no more than 20 minutes to settle all the formalities. The countdown has begun. "There are 30 days left until my departure to South Africa," the young man thought gloomily. He intended to spend as much of this time as possible with his beloved. Since Elena was now under the care of doctors, Maria finally had some free time for herself. She understood that this was her last chance to be with Enrique. The young man picked her up at the clinic entrance, and they went to the city center. They walked for a long time through the streets, holding hands and hardly talking. It was enough for them to be together. Maria felt her beloved with every fiber of her being, and her heart broke at the thought of the impending separation. Sensing the girl's distress, Enrique stopped and pulled her close. "Let's make a deal, Maria. Let's not think about the future or the past this whole month. Let's live here and now. We have nothing but the present moment. So let it be beautiful." Maria nodded, wiping away her tears, and kissed Enrique. They went to a cozy cafe, ordered delicious food, and gazed into each other's eyes for a long time. Then they walked through the city again, and later visited Elena. The woman was feeling well. She said she liked the staff and the food she had been given for lunch. Then Maria felt that her mother was tired, so she kissed her and wished her good night. Enrique took the girl to her apartment, and they secluded themselves in the bedroom again, unable to let go of each other. Every day, Enrique took Maria to a new place after they visited Elena. It was noticeable that the woman was getting better and better, although she still felt weak and continued to suffer from pain. However, she looked to the future with optimism. She had found the motivation to fight for her life. Maria rejoiced, looking at her mother, and mentally thanked Enrique over and over again for what he had done for them. With her beloved, everything was rainbow-colored and cloudless, and Maria tried not to think about the upcoming separation. However, the days melted away like sugar in a hot cup of coffee. Maria didn't even notice how the month came to an end. Enrique was supposed to leave for South Africa in 2 days. His plane ticket had already been booked. He didn't let Maria out of his sight for a second. They hardly talked. The girl and the young man already knew what the other felt. The night before his departure, Enrique and Maria stayed up all night. They couldn't stop touching each other. "I want to look at you so that I never forget a single feature of your face," Enrique whispered in Maria's ear. She took a shaky breath, holding back tears. "In the morning, I'll take you to the airport," the girl replied, but Enrique shook his head. "There's no need," he objected. "I don't want you to cry there alone among strangers when I leave." Maria sighed and kissed him. Enrique stroked her hair for a long, long time. By early morning, they fell asleep. Maria didn't hear the alarm clock, and Enrique didn't wake her. He quietly got dressed, took his suitcase, and left the house. When he was descending in the elevator, the young man couldn't hold back his bitter tears. Maria woke up late. Out of habit, she turned to kiss Enrique, but he was no longer there. Maria cried, burying her face in the pillow. When she calmed down a bit, she took her phone and checked the incoming messages. "Left. Love you," Enrique had written. "Safe travels." "I love you too," Maria replied, and her heart ached with pain. She lay down, and the tears began to flow from her eyes again. Elena was getting better and better. The treatment lasted about 3 months, and the latest medications were doing their job. The woman's headache stopped, and she didn't look as pale as usual. A pleasant blush appeared on her cheeks. Elena enjoyed walking through the small grove located on the clinic grounds. Sometimes Maria accompanied her, sometimes someone from the staff. The woman's appetite improved, and she happily interacted with other patients at the clinic. Life appeared before her in new colors. The illness was retreating, and now she no longer needed to rush anywhere, work hard, or take care of others. For the first time, Elena realized that she could take a deep breath and simply enjoy wonderful moments. Maria was very happy for her mother. They saw each other every day and talked for long periods about various topics. For the first time in many years, the girl felt kinship and closeness with her dearest person. She realized she could tell her mother everything that worried her, and she would respond with understanding, warmth, and kindness. Maria found solace in talking to her mother, although she still cried at night, missing Enrique. He called and wrote to her every day, but Maria knew this wouldn't last forever. Life had once again separated them, forcing them to go down different paths. But she passionately wanted to be with her beloved and prayed every night for God to give them another chance. Finally, Elena was discharged from the clinic, and they were able to return home. Initially, the woman needed to stay in bed, but she could take walks in the park and engage in any pleasant and calm activities. She became interested in knitting and macrame. When she was engaged in her favorite hobby, her face glowed with happiness, and Maria enjoyed watching her mother. Maria decided not to return to university but to take up remote work. She found translation jobs for articles and essays and spent a lot of time on the computer. Sometimes she worked from cozy coffee shops to add some variety to her days. Life slowly began to fall back into place. One day, in one of the coffee shops, a pleasant man sat next to Maria, and they talked for a long time. He asked for her phone number, and Maria agreed to give it to him. The next day, Javier, as the man was called, invited her to the theater. Maria didn't want to go, but Elena persuaded her. "Go, darling, get out a bit. You spend too much time at home as it is. And life isn't eternal, I know that all too well now." Maria nodded and started getting ready for the theater. She put on a beautiful green dress made of soft velvet, high-heeled shoes, applied lipstick, and took a small clutch purse. "You look wonderful," Elena admired when she saw her daughter. Maria smiled. Her heart felt heavy. It seemed to her that she was betraying Enrique. Javier was waiting for her at the theater entrance. They had a lovely evening together, and the man drove Maria home in his car. Before saying goodbye, he wanted to kiss her, but she instinctively pulled away. "Is something wrong?" Javier was surprised. No, you're a wonderful person, Maria replied, looking at him with sad eyes. But the thing is, another man has long occupied my heart. Then why aren't you together? Her companion asked. Maria felt tears welling up in her eyes. He had to leave. Javier asked why Maria hadn't gone with him if she loved him, and the girl told him her story. The man sighed and nodded understandingly. You can't abandon your mother, that's clear, he said. But you shouldn't sacrifice your own life either. He shook his head, remembering something. Once, I also lost the love of my life and regret it deeply. If I could turn back time, I would have fought till the end. But back then, I was too foolish. Maria listened to the man attentively. So don't give up, Maria. Believe that you are meant to be together, and God will grant you His mercy. Maria nodded and hugged Javier, feeling immense gratitude. She got out of the car and walked home. Javier watched her with a long, thoughtful gaze. They never saw each other again. The next week, one of Maria's sisters called. Hi, Maria. I'm calling to tell you some news. I'm coming home. Maria was taken aback and didn't know what to say at first. What do you mean? Were you expelled? She asked. I realized I chose the wrong major, the girl explained with a sigh. Programming and I are incompatible. But Nina can't stay away from the computer. I think she's already written several volumes of code. Maria paused, contemplating the information. What will you do now? She asked her sister. I'm not sure yet, she replied. I have a blog, and it seems like it will soon bring me a decent income. I hope it grows day by day. So, I won't rush into anything. I'll take a break and spend time with Mom. I miss her so much. Yes, Mom misses you too. I'm glad you made a conscious decision. I hope you won't regret it. No, I've already made up my mind. Her sister said firmly, adding, Listen, Maria, Mom told me on the phone that Enrique went to South Africa. Why don't you go to him? I'll look after Mom now. Maria couldn't believe her ears. Could it really be possible? Everything seemed so simple and yet unreal. She had thought for so long that her relationship with Enrique was doomed that now it was hard for her to believe she had another chance. She recalled Javier's words and smiled. That's wonderful. She told her sister. Thank you, dear. I got a ticket for Sunday. So, for Monday, you're officially free, sis. Maria smiled happily. Then I'll go check flights, she said, feeling wings growing behind her back. She found a suitable flight and, feeling very nervous, called Enrique. He couldn't believe his ears when he heard Maria's excited and joyful voice sharing the news. That's amazing. The young man whispered. I'll cancel everything and meet you at the airport. Maria smiled. Next week, they would be together again. The days flew by like 1 hour. When the plane landed at the airport and Maria walked into the large hall with her suitcase, she immediately saw Enrique with a huge bouquet of hydrangeas. He approached her, kissed her passionately on the lips, and Maria felt that she was home. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed the story, please support the video by liking it and leaving a comment. Thank you very much.